Graham is a bit of a pioneer in the crowdfunding arena, where he's now floating giant-sized Two-Fisted Manly Tales, which is a 100-page book featuring some of the greatest artists and writers in the business. And it's kind of a throwback in that the title explains itself. This is the kind of book that the major publishers wouldn't touch these days. They used to do it all the time, but it's fallen out of favor. So Graham is a bit of a pioneer in that sense. And he's closing in on $150,000. And if he makes that, the book is going to be a hardbound. And I want to tell you, every comic reader is going to want this book. The art is spectacular. Mike Golden is contributing his first continuity in years. Butch Geis is working with me again for the first time in decades. And there are many other great artists and writers involved. Chuck Dixon, Kevin Grevio. And you can find the book on Indiegogo. It's giant-sized, Two-Fisted Manly Tales. But let's go back to the beginning, Graham. Did you attend any school to learn how to draw? Did you go to Joe Kubert's?
I did. I went for 2 years, not concurrent years, at the Joe Kubert School. Started there in 81, 82, then ran out of money. I spent 82 and 83 going to local community college, taking art there. And then 83, 84, I came back for my second year at Kubert's and ran out of money again. So by that point, I had made some sales. In fact, I just came across, I did on my show last week, I did this magic portfolio, I called it. I found this giant portfolio with lots of stuff going back to the 80s. I found the first story I did with Chuck Dixon, and I found the second story I ever sold to DC Comics, and it was stamped on it 1983, copyright 1983 DC Comics. So next year will be my 40th year in comics.
What was that story?
The first one that was published was called The Fan. It's a little 2-page story, and it starred me as a comic book artist at a convention. And the second one was a sci-fi story. I think that was 3 or 4 pages. That's the one I still have, that I found the stamp on the back. But they were bought at the same time, so it means that 1983 was my first sale.
Was Joe Kubert still teaching when you went to the school?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the school had only been open, when did it open? 78 or 76? So, I was there in 81. So, yeah, Joe was teaching.
Joe had the biggest hands and forearms, like Popeye.
He had a grip on him that was like a steel vise. I consider I have a good grip. I was a wrestler, and you gotta develop that for that kind of stuff. But Joe was like sticking your hand in a vise. It's like, oh, he had those big Polish hands,
You're an advocate of lifting, aren't you?
Yeah. I got that from my wrestling days. I got into that. Had to take advanced weight training as part of the sport and all that, and then really got into it and enjoyed it. And then I had kids and became a doughboy. And then once I got into college and I was able to devote more time to it. So like the last 10 years, I've been back into it really, really good.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about your routine? Do you lift every day?
About 5 days a week. It depends on what I'm trying to do. I switch it up from going to strength training, which then I only do it 3 days a week, to doing what are called splits, where you take various muscle groups and you do exercises for those muscle groups, like push, pull, or specific groups. Right now, that's what I'm doing because it's lighter weights, and I have a problematic back, and right now I'm in the nursing it back stage.
I have a problematic back too.
It happens when you sit a lot. No matter what you're doing, there's a muscle near your spine called I think it's called the piriforma, and it gets it gets weak and it gets out of shape when you're sitting. And what happens is when it goes, it pushes against your sciatic nerve, and then it causes spasms. And before you know it, you're like, oh, you can't do anything. And that's what happens with me. It's like when it goes, it's like, it's brutal.
My chiropractor has a saying: we have to terraforma the paraforma.
Well, it could tear mine out as far as I'm concerned. It's more of a pain in my ass. Literally.
Graham, what prompted you to leave the majors?
I didn't like what comics were becoming in the late 90s. I felt that they were getting too violent. They were overly sexualized. Comics that I loved as a kid, and that my mom, if I was sick and I wanted some comic books, she'd go out to 7-Eleven and she could pick up Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, whatever, Captain America, even Conan, and not have to worry. Well, Conan she had to worry about. But the other one she didn't have to worry about. And, when I was with DC, I was under contract for a lot of years, and they would send the freelancers everything they published. And I had to cull through that stuff to find stuff that was appropriate for my young daughters at the time, because the stuff was too violent or overly sexual. So I was getting fed up with it. Editors were changing. So many of the contacts I had up there were leaving or were gone. And I got into self-publishing. I self-published a book called Monster Island back in 1998 as a comic book that I could do for my girls that they could read. And so that was the beginning of the end for me. And then I ended up getting into newspaper strips, working for King Feature Syndicate for about 13 years. So I was out of comics ostensibly for 13 years with an occasional freelance gig every now and then. And then, I decided that was so soul sucking. I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed more challenge. So I jumped back into comics again. And, it was hard finding work. And that was the time when the comic companies were really starting to get woke, and the leftist ideologues were starting to run the show. And they can say there's no blacklist, but there was a blacklist, and work wasn't coming. So I ended up getting involved in crowdfunding.
Well, you are hardly a risible personality. I wonder why they would blacklist you.
I know, I'm so lovable. Who would blacklist me?
But seriously, you're not a noisy online personality.
No, I'm not. I'm not an ideologue either. I mean, if people ask me my opinions, I'm not shy about saying them, and I won't back down if conversations come up and they start throwing some, nonsense that I disagree with, because I embrace and enjoy educated arguments. If you know your shit and you can defend it, let's go. Then just like in times past, you have a beer together and you laugh. I have a lot of friends that don't vote the way I vote or don't think the way I think, but we still remain friends. But in our business, what was happening was like this whole group think was going on. If you weren't in, you were out. And I found out from that the head of DC Comics at one point took work away from me. A guy wanted me to do the covers for those gigantic omnibuses, and it was Dan DiDio, really, who told this editor that give it to somebody we have a relationship with. Now, if they didn't have a relationship with me, then it was not my fault, because I was pitching stuff. I was contacting editors, and I'd get a polite no and all of that. So if there was no relationship with me, it wasn't for lack of trying on my end.
Like, since Mike was saying like that you're not that noisy online, that they were judging you because of some of your friends, maybe who might be more.
Yes, I do believe that is true. That I was lumped in with because of who or that type of thing. that was transferred over to me.
Yeah.
One friend in particular?
Well,
One very good friend who this guy couldn't stand. And then by, association, I was lumped in it too. But I'd rather be loyal to that friend than anybody else.
I think we all would at this stage. And I think we're all finding much greener pastures in crowdfunding.
No doubt about it. My wife sees in me a happiness she hasn't seen in years, that I'm happier now doing my own stuff, writing my material, publishing it, illustrating it, doing everything, and owning it. Right. I'm finding new markets and new fan bases, and I'm reaching out, and it's really been a wonderful thing. So many, they better start, our colleagues better start thinking about the future, because that Titanic is sinking and they're rearranging deck chairs.
Your Alien Alamo is a wholesome comic for the whole family, I would say. Wouldn't you say so?
I would. I mean, there is some gore in it, so they'd have to be aware of that. My first book, The Chenoo, was strictly straight up horror. If that was a movie, it'd be rated R because of the gore and some of the language in it. Alien Alamo is definitely a much more family friendly, but it touches on subjects and topics like PTSD that are definitely, much more mature. But it's illustrated in a style that looks kind of like 50s cartoons. It has a more of an animated feel to it. So it's deceptively embraceable, I guess you could say.
The 10-issue Bane series you did with Chuck, was that after you had more or less been shown the door, that they came back to you?
Yeah. DC did not want to publish it, but DC had to publish it. So that's all I'm going to say.
Why did they have to publish it?
You can't, Mike.
Okay, I can't. I just told you.
He just said he can't say.
Because of the market demanded it. That would be the only rational reason.
Would it?
Oh, it seems to me that there was a huge demand for that series, and it did very well.
No, it didn't do well. No, it didn't do well at all, because they didn't publicize it. They didn't promote it. They had all their eggs in the Tom King. What's it called? I forget the name of his series. Something of Bane. So they had their eggs in that basket. Whereas, Chuck and I set out to set Bane up as the Dr. Doom of the DC universe. The guy who's running all the major crime things in DC. And in our 12-issue series, and we peppered it with all kinds of Easter eggs to keep that series going, or to revisit it. And once the obligation was met to publish it, that was it. They didn't, we thought, I guess childishly, that fences are mended. We're back in, and we pitched a bunch of stuff, really cool shit, really cool stuff, and they turned every one of them down. So it's like, okay, and it wasn't it wasn't stuff. It's
been collected in trade now, right?
It has, yeah.
Do you have any idea how it's done? In the trade format?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd be curious if it actually did okay.
I'm sure it did. I mean, most of the stuff, it was already paid for. All the art and everything was already paid for. So the printing costs aren't that high. So the profit margins are a lot higher on that stuff. So, you know, I mean, that's where a lot of the money comes from now is trade paperbacks and book sales and stuff, because the floppies, those numbers are in the shitter, even though they don't want to admit it. They say, "Oh, comics are doing better than ever." No, because you're lumping in manga and you're lumping in graphic novels and young adult stuff that's published by Scholastic, like Captain Underpants stuff,
right,
as comics. Those things are selling millions, but Batman can barely break 150,000 copies.
And there's been talk going around for years that Marvel and DC are both planning to get out of the comic business.
Yeah, I think that down the road, now that they've been bought out by these various larger multinational corporations who really don't give a shit about publishing, Disney could care less, and now Discovery, who owns DC Comics, after that merger, I don't think they care about publishing. All they care about is mining the IP. And they've got 80 years of material to deal with. So in their minds, they're thinking, why do we have to produce new stuff? So now you've got these ideologues in there pushing all these agenda-driven stuff that isn't selling for crap, and they don't care because the message is more important than sales to them.
It's my impression that the editorial staff at both the big two have no connection to the golden, silver, or bronze age of comics, that they're young people that are brought in or thrilled to be given an editorial position, but they're not really comic fans and they're not really familiar with the history of comics.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that they don't know the business of comics as well as the history of it. Whether they're using it as a stepping stone to go on to something else, or they're in love with the idea of comics and what they think comics are, but they don't know. They weren't trained by seasoned editors. That lineage that you can trace back from Stan Lee to Roy Thomas to Archie Goodwin to Denny O'Neil to Mike Carlin, and then all of a sudden you're starting to water this stuff down, and you're getting it's like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox, but they're not picking up anything new. And you get these people that are more interested in making a name for themselves than selling books.
I have to point out, one of the main reasons comic sales are in the toilet is seldom discussed, but it's the competition from video games. Because the fact is that your $4 or $5 comic simply cannot match the bang for the buck you get with a good video game like Grand Theft Auto, where the game changes every time you play it. A great deal more thought is put into those games and those stories than appears to be going into the comic book stories, which is all part of Sturgeon's law. Theodore Sturgeon was a great science fiction writer, and Sturgeon's law was 90% of everything is crap. And I think to a large extent that holds true across all popular culture. If you built a comic that was so exciting and dynamic and well done, like, say, Frank Miller, something like The Return of the Dark Knight, people would flock to it, but there's nothing coming out like that these days.
Well, there's another aspect too, and that is getting eyeballs on it. The idea of what do we have? 3,000 comic shops in the United States. That's it.
Yeah, 3,000.
How are you going to get the millions of eyeballs on product? Then it's just not going to happen. Which is why in crowdfunding, we're doing YouTube and we're using social media and we're reaching out and we're talking directly with the fans. And that's a huge paradigm shift. There's no walls anymore between the fan base and the creators. And that's an important aspect that, it's like we're all part of this club again. The way Stan used to make the bullpen sound, Jolly Jack and Sturdy Steve and all these guys are sitting right there, bullpen, grinding this stuff out, having fun, and none of them were ever there. They're out in Brooklyn and in Manhattan or Long Island or wherever they were working in their basement. But Stan had this impression, and he made the fans feel like they were part of it. Well, now they are part of it. It's not just feeling it; they are a part. And so that's really cool, I think.
Solution to broadening the readership for traditional superhero comics has been staring us in the face for decades, but people refuse to do it. And that is simply to put comic kiosks in the lobbies of movie theaters, especially when they're showing a Spider-Man or Superman movie.
Mm-hmm.
This has been obvious for decades, but for some reason, the theater owners and the comic shops just can't get together on it.
Yeah. That's true. When you have the Avengers Endgame and, making billions of dollars and everybody on the planet going to see it, and they come out and there's no comics.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can't get to, you have to seek out comics. When we were kids, comics were everywhere, grocery stores, 7-Elevens, luncheonettes, you could find, you could happen upon comics. Which is what the exciting part of it was to a young kid is, this isn't my parents. This is mine. I've discovered this, now it's like looking, you got to look for a porn shop. You can't just, come upon it. You gotta, the comic book shops are the same way. You got to seek it out. You have to know about it and seek it out.
I have to say that in that category, Fort Collins seems to be bucking the trend. Because we've had a couple of new comic shops open up here recently, they're hole in the wall places. They're not like Mile High Comics. They're small, but they're encouraging. There's one just opened up. Two opened up in the past year. One is a dedicated comic shop, nothing but comics, but because it's small, their selection is limited, mostly to the big two, and plus the middle tier publishers who have something to offer, like Dark Horse or IDW or Dynamite. But very few titles of those. They simply don't have the wall space. Now, we do have one big comic shop in town, but even they are forced to pick and choose. They can't possibly feature every title offered by the big two. They just can't afford it because they're not going to sell, and they changed the returnable rules. So they also double as a gaming shop, and I suspect that they're making more money off the gaming than they are off the comics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of comic shops too are dealing in collectibles.
Yeah,
that they are that they're embracing the idea that comics are becoming boutique, and they're slabbing back issues and having TV auctions for them and raising the interest in the collectability and stuff. And I don't see that as a bad thing. In fact, that's pretty much what we're doing with crowdfunding is we are a boutique comic market where we're doing comics directly for the fan base, in which they have access to the creator and they're a part of the creation with their support. And then as a result, they get all these other goodies, stretch goal stuff that you can't get at a comic book shop. Right. And so for your $25, which seems to be the average price of a 48-page or 64-page comic, it's better than anything Marvel and DC is doing because the printing is better. They're perfect bound, most of them. So we're competing on two different playing fields here, and not going after exactly the same target audience. But the idea is to broaden that market too. I want as many eyes on my projects as possible and as many backers and customers to enjoy these things as possible. That's what business does. Boutique is fine, and boutique can be huge too. But I'm not competing with the mass production style of comics that the periodicals or the floppies deal in. Different audience. My website, compasscomics.com, is where all my projects go after the campaigns have ended. So, if you've missed out on any of my campaigns, getting those books, you can always get them at compasscomics.com. You're going to pay more for them, and you're not going to get any of the stretch goals goodies, but the books are available there.
Since you said next year is going to be your 40th, do you have any big plans or releases or anything you're going to do for that?
I don't have anything planned yet, but I'm planning on something. Because I just realized this just last week when I pulled that artwork out and I saw the date. I'm like, wait a minute, holy shit, this is the 40th year. I got to do something. What that is, I don't know. I haven't locked it down yet, but I want to do some kind of like big party, do a big stream and have all my friends on, and they'll all get me gifts and send me cash.
And we'll be drinking.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No
cigars or anything though.
Yeah, cigars, bourbon.
And Graham is most certainly going to smoke a cigar.
Damn right.
I don't know what I'm going to smoke.
Oh, I know what you're going to smoke. I've got an idea of what you're going to smoke.
Yeah.
I will say, too, for anybody that has not checked out Graham's Kickstarters, even though there's been tons of people who have, he does have some cool rewards on a lot of the stuff, a lot of different perks and everything. I do like the brass knuckles that you have.
The brass knuckle trophy. The Two-Fisted Man of the Year trophy. And the limited edition shirts are leaving at the end of this week because I'm putting orders in on Monday for those. So if anybody's watching this when this runs, you should go over to the Indiegogo website, type in giant size two-fisted manly tales and snag those now because they're coming down.
What prompted you to do that book, Graham?
Two-Fisted Manly Tales?
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was not part of my publishing plan. It was about a year ago, last summer, when I reached out to you guys, you Chuck, and Bo, about it. It came about, I was in the backyard, I was having a cigar, and I was probably scrolling around on my iPad or something like that, and something came across that really pissed me off. It was just one more assault on masculinity. And I just, I got the idea from the title. I came up with the title first, Giant Size Two-Fisted Manly Tales. And I knew immediately I wanted to mimic the giant size comics or annuals that Marvel did in the 70s. So I made up that trade dress to look like that. And, typically anthologies don't sell. But I knew this had to be an anthology, and I knew I had to get the best guys to do it. And I knew it would sell if I could do that so that there was no fluff in there. So I contacted Chuck and Mike and Bo, and then Kevin Grievous, and then myself of the 5 writers. And then it was a matter of casting, net out to find artists whose work I admired, that would fit the style of stories that the guys wrote. But it came about primarily as, I slotted it into my publishing schedule ahead of the next book in the Nolan verse because I felt it was an important thing to do. I was just sick and tired of men being denigrated for being men and not being appreciated for the kinds of things that they bring. I'm not talking about, out and out apehead, hammerhead, misogynistic type stuff. I mean, yes, that's part of who we are too at times, but we're also protectors and providers and builders and workers and soldiers and all these other things that build empires. It's not because of women; it's because of men. And you can't watch a television commercial now. And when was the last time you saw a guy driving the car? If he's not just some little cock, half the time it's the woman that's driving, and the kids are in the back, and the dad's the goofball, and he's never taken seriously, and it's always the woman that solves problems. These have infiltrated popular culture of how men are. The ideas of these strong masculine men, the John Waynes and the Clint Eastwoods, seem to be gone.
This is a throwback to the men's adventure magazines of the 50s and 60s, which were everywhere at the time.
Right.
They were a little lurid, but often they told true stories by survivors of events. In fact, I have a couple of anthologies of those, and they preserve the cover art. And the cover art is lurid in the best sense of the word, that it's it makes the story pop. It's obviously exaggerated for the sake of art. But we've all seen that picture of the guy in the swamp fighting off the weasels, right? Weasels rip my flesh.
Yeah.
And I have a whole book of those covers, and we love that.
They're
stuff.
great. Yeah, they're pulpish, they're garish, but they're exciting. How can you not pick that up? So I just felt that this was the time was right for us to do this kind of thing, and it's been doing very well. I'm actually going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign for it. Right now, it's on Indiegogo. So I'm going to run 2 campaigns because just like Coke and Pepsi and McDonald's and Burger King, there are people that will not cross the line.
It's true.
For whatever that is. So again, this is my attempt to bring more people into the tent.
What are you doing differently on the other one?
On the Kickstarter one, it's more stripped down. Only the Dan Lawless cover is available. Only some of the perks or stretch goals are part of it because they're already the book's already funded. The people on Indiegogo did that, so they're the ones that should get the best, the biggest opportunities. And the reason is at 150,000, the book becomes hardcover, as Mike said earlier. Right now, we're closing in on 114, I think. So there's still a gap. And we're moving along on time. This is not going to be in demand as long as some other of my projects that I am doing everything on. It takes longer to do, so it stays in demand longer and can build momentum longer. This one, because everybody else is working on it and stuff, it's going to fulfill quickly, and will be on time in August. So in my effort to bump that up, if we can get another 40,000, whatever it is, 50,000, to kick that up to 150, then on the Indiegogo people that got the original Michael Golden cover will have their books upgraded too, because I'm going to combine the two, so that they those initial supporters get the big break. Basically a store for Kickstarter. So for people that want these books and won't cross over, they have an opportunity to get it. But they're getting, they don't get the same goodies you would if you're on Indiegogo.
When the book comes out, there's a good chance that you could approach a publisher, not just any publisher, because as we know, the publishers have gone woke. In fact, Penguin has a racial quota system for people who are submitting books. But there are other publishers out there that might be interested, conservative publishers like Regnery, for example. And because everybody's been paid already, they wouldn't have to pony up the creative costs for it. And I think everybody, to see that book in a bookstore, would be willing to take a royalty deal.
Maybe. We'll have to see.
Who do you like?
Who do I like?
Yeah, as a writer.
Oh, I just did a show on this. I like Elmore Leonard. Yeah. I like John D. McDonald.
Oh, John D. That's why I'm writing.
Okay. I like Ernest Hemingway. I like Carl Hyacin. Let's see, who else?
You know that Elmore Leonard never outlined. He's one of the very rare novelists who would just sit down and start banging by the seat of his pants.
He's amazing. I just saw a great Elmore Leonard quote. He said, what do you say to a man with 2 black eyes? Nothing. He's been corrected twice already.
Have you heard of Jack Carr?
I have. I don't think I've read any of his stuff, though.
He's an amazing writer. I'm on his second book now. The first was The Terminal List. Jack Carr is an ex-Navy SEAL who has been all over the world, and he writes with an authenticity no other thriller writer can match. He gets all the hardware correct. He gets the procedures correct. He's been to every city in the world, it appears. When he describes a city in Africa, he's been walking down the street. He's a guy I recommend. They're turning his books into a series starring Chris Pine.
Cool.
The guy's name is Reese. I think his hero, Steve Reese, is and he's a series now. Like Travis McGee was a series, and so far Carr has written 3 books in the series. His books are enormous. They're not John D. McDonald size. They're like they're well over 100,000 words each, well over.
Oh wow!
And I know because I've been reading this book for 4 months now.
You read like me. You read 8 paragraphs and fall asleep.
I did want to say, just because you had brought it up, and I know just as much part of the being tough and everything with being a man is the fact of being respectful and doing respecting your wife and respecting various institutions or things and carrying yourself like with honor. And that was like one of the things that I was like that's 2 of the things that I've thought, like when I've seen your stuff and different things you've said, like I think of like respect and honor, and those are the stories that resonate with us so strongly, like Man on Fire and some other things where the people where the good guy does terrible things, but he's doing it because of his kind of code of honor and respect and everything that he has.
The other personal aspect is loyalty.
Yeah.
Which is huge for me. I give it and I expect it.
That's right.
And if I don't get it, then you're out.
Yeah.
There's a line from Man on Fire when Creasy says, "Do you think God will ever forgive us for what we've done?" Have you seen the movie?
No.
Oh God!
It's a pretty powerful movie.
You got to see it. It's Tony Scott's masterpiece and one of Denzel Washington's best movies. It's a near perfect thriller.
Yeah.
When did it come out?
Oh, at least 10, 12, 15 years ago. It's the second version of the movie, of the book. The first one starred Scott Glenn, and it's a yawner. It's just forgettable. The second one is such a powerhouse, you can't believe it. Man on Fire.
Man on Fire. All right.
Yeah, he's a retired CIA goon who's drinking himself to death when he gets a job bodyguarding a little girl in Mexico City where kidnappings are rampant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he tapes the guy's hands to the steering wheel.
So that's later on.
Yeah.
Let's not give too much away.
Well, it's a memorable scene.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
I'll look for it.
Is Compass Comics mainly about getting your projects out, or are you going to be bringing in more people, or it just depends on whatever the project is?
Well, it started that way to be a showcase for my projects. I have a publishing plan with for what I call the Nolan verse, which are these stories, these books that all reside in horror, sci-fi, supernatural worlds. It's not superhero stuff, but all this stuff, and they're all interconnected, and it includes Joe Frankenstein as well. I even mentioned Joe Frankenstein in the Chenoo obliquely, but if you are aware of it, you'll get the reference. But these stories are all interconnecting. The characters are coming and going throughout different stories. The last one, Alien Alamo, will feature in the next book, The Ghosts of Matacumba Key, will feature a character, or actually a character from Alien Alamo and a character from the Chenoo in it.
Nice.
So to answer your question, it was originally to showcase, and then I decided, well, I wanted to do this as well, the Two-Fisted Manly Tales. And it's a lot of work as a publisher. You got to be diplomat and cat wrangler all in one.
Yeah.
It's also not as profitable because there's more overhead costs, obviously, to pay creators and all that kind of stuff. So will I do that again? I don't know. I'm not totally turned off on it. It all depends. I'm thinking of giant-sized Two-Fisted Adventure Tales. as the next one. And then there is going to be a Joe Frankenstein one too. And we're going to do Return to Joe Frankenstein.
Will you self-publish that?
Yes, that'll be under Compass Comics.
Speaking of adventure, did you? I saw. I think you did some Phantom comics, or did you just do the cover?
The strip for 10 years.
Yeah, the strip. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the Sunday strip. Yep. Yeah, I enjoyed working on the Phantom. I was promised the dailies too when that guy retired, and then King Features reneged on me, and they wanted to keep the biggest licensor, a company called Egmont in Sweden, happy because they wanted a guy that works for them to take over the strips, and it was American Paul Ryan, and who had a working relationship with them. And Paul was a great guy. There's nothing against Paul here, but it's just that they promised it to me, and they didn't have the ball to tell the Egmont that, hey, this is our character. This is the guy. He's doing the Sundays. Everybody's loving it. We're going to give him the dailies too. And they didn't do it. And I felt I got boned. And so I walked away from the Phantom. But I really enjoyed doing that strip.
Well, it's a shame that the newspaper comic strip is dying. The adventure strip has been dead for years. I don't know what's left. Mary Worth, maybe. There's some ghosts walking with the names of famous adventure strips.
Yeah, Dick Tracy's still there, but
yeah, Graham, I actually got started as a ghostwriter on Steve Roper and Mike Nomad.
Oh, I love that strip.
Yeah,
Norman Saunders.
Yeah, but I was actually working more with the artist Fran Matera.
Oh, Matera.
Yeah. Yep.
Were those ever collected, Jeff?
I don't know if the last ones were. But I mean, it was a blast because Fran I basically came in when the writer had passed away, and as you know, and they had and for that they had like the weekly stories, and then they had the weekend stories, which I mean, it was great for me. It was a great crash course in learning how to tell stories when you're so limited with what you have to work with and everything. So I mean, that's why I was like, man, this is great for me because you have to have stuff done for every single day. And I mean,
it's a continual continual hamster wheel.
Yeah.
It just goes and it goes and goes. And there's never any satisfaction.
Right.
Because the syndicates don't care. All they care is that the stuff is there for publishing dates.
Right.
They don't care what you're doing. So you're never getting any feedback. I mean, when I first got into the strips, I had a million ideas. I wanted to bring back the adventure strip. I came up with an idea to modernize the girls of Apartment 3G, and I had to sit down with the publisher and, oh no, we can't put the money into that.
Right.
Basically, those things are cash cows for them while they run. They've got their papers, their legacy strips. It doesn't cost them much, but they make a profit on it. And that's all they care about. But it turns out I took that idea for the girls and created the Girls of Dimension 13 for Aftershock Comics.
Nice.
So never throw out ideas.
I mean, that's one of the great things about what you're doing now, too, with the boutique sales and everything. And it reminds me a little bit of like Stranger Things, like how they're tapping into the past and different things, but they're doing kind of their own thing with it, and there's definitely a market for it. People are into it and they're willing to pay for it, and that's the good thing about what you're doing, and you can definitely do that some more.
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. There's an underserved market out there that love comics, and those comics aren't being made for them anymore, and guys like me are doing it, So, gentlemen, I have to run because my show is going to start in 1 minute.
1 minute.
Thanks, Graham.
Sounds good.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Really appreciate it.